welcome, a very warm welcome to Kilian Kleinschmidt, our guest this evening. Hello, Kilian.
Hello, good evening.
I'm very happy that you are here. I think a lot of our viewers and participants know you from the media. In Germany and Austria, we could read quite a lot about you. You have over 25 years of hands-on experience in development, international development, resource mobilization, and political regional cooperation in the context of migration and asylum. We all know about your management of the Zaatari refugee camp. The broader question that was announced for today was, why do people decide to leave their homes, and what are the social and economic consequences both for the host countries as well as for the societies, for the countries of origin?
Obviously, this is a theme which suddenly has struck Europe, and people are questioning, debating, and it has really polarized society very much. And somehow, I personally must confess that I have that sort of deep in myself, that feeling, well, finally it has reached Europe, because the realities out there in the world are mass migration, movements of people on the move already for a long time. At least 40,000 people were displaced afresh by war. But we're forgetting that this is all sort of increasingly a mix of reasons which are, again, linked to climate change, to extreme poverty, and of course then the resulting also conflicts, which are quite often, of course, also linked to sort of global interest or national interest of one nation or the other. So lots of people on the move, but it hasn't really occurred to us, because we were watching this on TV. We were putting our €5 into somebody's collection box, and happy we were it didn't reach us. And now it is there. So the world's richest nations finally understand that, yes, there are millions and millions of people on the move. What is happening out there is somewhat clearly also a result of globalization. Globalization is increasingly facilitating access to communication, access to information. Every Syrian can Google Earth you, can check how it looks like in your street. Information is traveling very fast. Transportation has become global and easy. Vienna, where I am, in 3.5 hours, there's a direct flight with Austrian Airlines into northern Iraq. I mean, the world has become extremely small, and that connectivity doesn't belong only to the rich, it also belongs to the poor. And that we're seeing now, where they're saying, hello, why shall I hang around in places where I have a total violation of my basic human rights? The people have to survive on their own, and that means they're living in shacks and unfinished buildings. That accounts for most people who do not have the financial means to actually rent nicer apartments. That also exists. Of course, there are people with money who flee. You don't have to be poor to flee. You can also be rich. But most people are really surviving. Governments have been screaming for help. Nothing has been coming.
First, there was a question by Belinda, and this is, why are charities becoming less compassionate?
There is a pie. There is a cake for the whole world. There was $24.5 billion last year for humanitarian emergency aid. That pie doesn't become much larger. It has grown over the last...
but it didn't decrease.
No, it didn't decrease, but you have more people. Every time an earthquake hits, you have somebody else who doesn't get that money. The money is still there, but it's simply not enough to deal with all the crises.
How can the cake become or be made larger, which is pretty much connected to what you were saying? The one is to distribute better, if I understood it right?
That's correct. Just to use the existing resources better, use money also as a trigger to actually bring in others. And I'll give you an example which I really saw in the camp in Zaatari. The water situation. Water had to be trucked in by water tankers, by trucks. 2.7 million liters of water every day for 100,000 people in the camp. That is, of course, a very expensive operation. At the same time, dirty water, sewage had to be trucked out. Garbage had to be trucked out. It took till now to actually begin the construction of a piped water network. To put you the dimensions, to bring water in and out and garbage in and so on, $30 million a year. If you would build a piped water system and a sewage system and so on, yes, it's heavy investment in the beginning, but within a very short while, you have actually your return on investment.
Sonja Bettel was posting a comment in the chat. She said, thinking about the costs for fences in Europe now, and how many refugees you could provide with food, water, sanitary systems, and for how long, but how many innovation you could maybe foster with what you are investing in this very old-fashioned concept of fences.
Any fortress only works if you open the gates and if there's a free exchange of people and goods. Otherwise, fortresses die and actually suffocate. And that sort of discussion, of course. No, I mean, it's clear money can be used differently. The way forward in this current, what we perceive as crisis, which is a reality for everybody for a long time, is, of course, one, humanitarian financing to the right level, two, structural financing partnerships, as we were just talking about, and three, obviously, legal ways of traveling through the world. Migration doesn't belong only to the rich. Migration belongs to all of us. The right to move is something, of course, needs some form of regulation, agree. And so to turn it around into something more proactive, where we're saying, well, people need to be able to access opportunities. It's an investment in all of us, simply from the famous human capital question. I mean, if you have people sort of hanging around and they could do much more, they have lots of energy and desire to do something. And here Zaatari is a perfect example. And maybe it's the moment to show that little movie, because it's to enlighten us a little bit and show us, and it's a bit funny as well, to show that refugees are not poor little things which you need to spoon feed, but there is desire for change. There is something really moving. And this little movie, I don't know whether we can show it now.
Yeah, we can show it now.
It's done 1 year after the establishment of Zaatari camp, and it's really, I think, food for thought.
The scale of Zaatari refugee camp is staggering. 3 kilometers from east to west, so big it's now considered Jordan's 5th largest city. And to illustrate its size, back down on the ground, a complete loop of the camp's outer ring road takes more than 20 minutes by car. And inside the camp, the number of residents has grown from a few hundred to about 120,000 people. And where there's that kind of population growth, commerce quickly follows. So this is Zaatari's main business street. It's home to hundreds of shops and services, and it's so popular with Syrians and camp workers, it's been nicknamed the Champs-Élysées in reference to the bustling shopping street in the French capital, Paris. A walk along the street reveals a brisk trade in anything from mobile phone SIM cards, cigarettes, gas refills and electrical appliances. But aside from the sale of goods, services play an important part in creating a sense of normality in the camp. The owner of this business quit his beauty salon in Dara, Syria, and moved to Zaatari last year. The shop generates a small profit by offering haircuts at a $1.50 fixed price. But running a camp business is wrought with contradictions.
I'm worried about lost opportunities and if I'm making the right decisions. For example, I look around me and think, should I renovate the place and expand it? And then I think, why? You're going back. Some people say the camp was better in the old days when they used to distribute meals. But I think that now is better. We can open our own shops. And the fact that this is possible is good for us. Now we're living like anyone else.
And there's no better way of illustrating that point than having a look round Atef's wedding dress hire shop, a hot spot for brides-to-be.
أول ما فتحنا المحل محل عبية نسائي Women used to come here, say they have weddings and they can't find dresses. So we got 2 dresses for rent and it worked out well. We have 2 weddings a day and there are people who come from outside the camp to rent dresses because it's cheaper here. The profit is not that much, but we are doing okay. Sometimes we even take 5 dinars from people who can't afford to pay much.
But while formal businesses thrive, so too does Zaatari's black market. District gangs are known to make a handsome profit by selling on aid goods and siphoning off electricity supplies. The man tasked with tackling this issue is camp manager Kilian Kleinschmidt.
That's the live chicken market here.
A walk around the camp reveals how his policy of encouraging business development is having a harmonizing effect. But sometimes, and in the interest of maintaining peace, even he has to turn a blind eye to the camp's more questionable business deals. Back in Mr. Kleinschmidt's meeting room, and you can't help but notice this. The interactive map once used to explain his camp strategy to US Secretary of State John Kerry. In short, district councils need to be introduced to improve law and order.
We need to bring in control, manage it, but also give the freedom for people to develop their businesses and develop their capacities, develop their homes. So that's why we, as we speak, trying to put in place physical compounds, physical administration, divide the whole place into 12 districts, which allows us to actually know who is there, what they're doing, and help them to doing their things in a better way, in a more regulated way, but also in a free way. That's what free market economy is about.
So economic theory as a way of bringing about calm and stability. But keeping the peace in a camp is not always that straightforward. At the end of a long, hot day, tempers can fray. Tear gas used by Jordanian security to disperse a frustrated crowd. A reminder that Zaatari Champs-Élysées is far from its French namesake when it comes to doing business.
This is a very pragmatic approach you have, I guess.
And it's an incredible actually experience to see how fast things can change if you're providing impulses and if you move away from, again, looking at this as charity. So we have that, I would say, arrogance towards people from other regions, and it's a very colonial approach at times, and looking at them and saying, I will donate you, I will give something to you. They have the same capacities, maybe not always the same knowledge, the same technologies, but the same capacities than all of us, and the same desire. There's nothing more dehumanizing than queuing up at a food distribution center and getting exactly the same food like everyone else and being forced to eat the same. They want to get on with their lives. By the way, that beauty salon guy, he has now 3 shops in the camp. He decided to invest because it's going on. So, no, they want to work, they want to continue, and sometimes the refugee status is not helping, unfortunately.
There's a lot of talk on the current migration crisis, on distribution issues of resources and people's lack of the willingness to share resources in the world. However, a problem that could in the long term be equally important in relation to migration is the ongoing process of moving more and more work from humans to machines. Is this a factor that needs to be taken into account more seriously when thinking about migration in the very long term?
Let's not defend very, very hard labor work, which should be done by machines and not by muscles. I think in general, the world can only increasingly benefit from certain advantages. The modernization and certain technologies can actually bring in. It's up to us, people who believe in change, also to capture this and put it at use, not only for the rich, but for everyone.
Earlier on, when you started, you said the children work inside the camp, and what kind of work is available for children, or children have to work? I hope I understood that question correctly.
2/3 of the refugee children in the Middle East cannot go to school, have to work in the farms. go work in the markets, help in the shops. But it's a lot of farm labor, actually, construction work, all these things which I mean, very, very bad for kids. I mean, and you see this, actually, the right to be a child disappears when you become poor. And you have to work on that. I mean, it's really, children don't even know how to play anymore. It's sad to see, but I mean, how many children, all of these classes I've seen, who cannot even play anymore. So the right for the children to play is something which I really think needs to, but okay, education and play are two things. Childhood is gone, little 7-, 8-year-olds becoming like adults. Terrible.
How clear and certain is the connection between the reasons why people get away from their home countries and our European economic interests that we enforce there?
And I think, surprisingly, at least from a party perspective, the German Minister for Development said it very well when he said, let's not forget that the G7 countries are the most guilty for the exploitation of the African continent even today. And so nothing has changed in this. I mean, sometimes in the discussions you're getting into you're getting accused of using ridiculous and boring arguments. Yeah, well, they still are valid. Resources are being used. There's no equality. There's no sharing back. It's not the same. It's not looking at each other at the same level. So yes, there is a direct influence of our interests. Of course, also linked to geostrategic interests of the Americans and others. There is incredibly much interference. Of course, we know that because of resource interests, pipelines, oil pipelines play a big role, I think, in the Syria context and so on. It's a big game. Hasn't changed.
Give us an impression what you think about the situation in Austria and Germany and the approach and what could be done.
The issue is that the capacities in Europe are totally overstretched because, again, you have bureaucracy and something. So we had last night about 250 people sleeping somewhere else. I mean, thinking they could go to Kreiskirchen and get reception there. No, they cannot, because we have all decided, everybody who was criticizing it, there shouldn't be more than 1,800 people or so. And there will not be more, because that's the capacity as it is. So again, it shows that more capacities have to be built. Politicians have to jump over their own shadow and actually accept that problems can't be solved in politicking around. The good news is, for the Austrians, is that today an agreement was signed, which my team facilitated actually, between Austria and the United Nations World Food Programme, which is the logistics, let's say, expert organization within the United Nations system, to help Austria with the provision of shelters and with the provision of logistic supplies to set up capacities within the next few days, actually, for an additional 10,000 people. We know we need to go higher, and that's what the United Nations will provide support to the Austrian government. So there's logistics on one hand, and there is, of course, that whole concept of how can we capture actually available space within a country, and a rich country like Austria has, of course, plenty of space, but then again, there's no system to really, in an effective way, use all the offers for private accommodation and so on. So we're going to discuss actually with Airbnb whether they cannot help in setting up such a system. I know there are a few smaller approaches with refugee Airbnb in Germany and so on, but I think we can bring this and scale this up on a larger level. Probably now coming back to Europe and the role Europe should play, maybe the European Union as such will not be able to get it together, but I think a few countries should push forward, and I would think that Germany, Sweden, maybe France, Austria, a few others, should actually get sort of a very, very informed process together of let's work on a comprehensive overall plan of how we intervene in those regions, those crisis regions, look crisis by crisis, region by region of what can be done, set up stability pacts, whatever plans we can call it differently, really invest, but have that sort of holistic approach rather than shooting from the hips as all these politicians do currently. I mean, it's amazing how many different opinions we'll find even within the same political party.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Kleinschmidt. This is a very good final statement from my point of view.